Hi guys, and welcome to another tutorial in Explain Mobile. With me today I have the Boeing 737-800, and in this tutorial I am simply going to demonstrate to you guys how to do an ILS, which stands for Instrument Landing System. Now ILS is a system that is used when pilots are doing an approach into a runway, either under bed where they need assistance from radio beacons transmitting an ILS signal, which is basically a localizer and a glide slope. Now, an ILS system is divided into three categories. There is CAT 1 ILS, then there is CAT 2 ILS, and CAT 3 ILS. All categories of ILS systems are divided according to the RVR, which stands for Runway Visual Range, before the aircraft can land. Some aircrafts are qualified for CAT 1 ILS, which is minimums, I believe, at 750 feet for the runway visual range, and CAT 2 has a runway visual range around 500 feet, or between 500 feet to 250 feet, and then CAT 3 instrument landing approach requires a runway visual range of only 100 feet. But CAT 3 is the most unique of the ILS systems because it requires the aircraft performing that to be fitted with an autopilot system that is capable of auto landing. So as I mentioned, in this tutorial I'm actually going to demonstrate how the Boeing 737 can auto land itself. Having said that, we're just going to define our weather conditions today. We have visual range of more than 15 square miles, which is pretty good. But then would cover stretching all the way from 1000 feet all the way to just 100 feet AGL, or above ground level. So that means from the time I have to descend into my destination airport, starting from 1000 feet and below, I have to be completely IFR using the ILS system. If you're not familiar with what IFR simply stands for Instrument Flight Rules, which are basically the rules that a pilot obeys under the instrument meteorological conditions. Now, having said that, I have to tell you where my current location is, and I'm currently flying over the Pacific Ocean. I am heading towards Hawaii, and my destination airport will be on the main island of Hawaii, which is Oahu, or it's actually the biggest island of the Hawaii region, and it has the biggest airport in that region as well, which is Daniel K. Inouye International Airport, or Papa Hotel November Lima. That is going to be my destination airport, and the information that I have regarding that is we are going to land on runway 8 left, requiring an ILS operating within the radio frequency of 111.70, and I can just show you that right away on my navigation radio. Nav1 111.70 is selected for ILS frequency, and the airport sits at an elevation of 13 feet above sea level, and our QNH reading is going to be 1013 hectopascals. So as we approach into the airport, we are just going to do all the requirements for the aircraft to be capable of landing in that region. Another thing required for this ILS approach is either radar vectors or a DME, which stands for distance measuring equipment. Alright, having said that, let's see our waypoints. Looking at my FMC, I'm heading towards a waypoint Julia Uniform Lima Lima Echo, on a heading of 88 degrees, 14 nautical miles away. Then after that, I'll go to Kilo Echo Oscar Lima Alpha, which is Kiola. Then after that, I'll go to Selig Sierra Echo Lima India Charlie. Then I'll get on to Rodao, which is Romeo Oscar Delta Alpha Whiskey, which is my initial approach fix. Now, an initial approach fix is an initial waypoint that you get attached to as you start your instrument landing approach. And then after that, I'm going to Fitchtree, Foxtrot, Golf, Tango, Romeo Echo, and then after that I'll join on to runway 8 left for an ILS approach. missed approach altitude required to climb to 5,000, and we're going to join Alana, which is Alpha Lima Alpha November Alpha, and we'll fly a holding pattern at Alana. So having said that, I'm just going to come back to initial page, and I'm going to set an initial fix at Selic. So if I go to my progress page, and my holding pattern is going to be there we go, fix. Go to the legs page. Our initial fix is going to be Selic, so I'm going to the fix page and I'm going to select Selic into the scratch pad. There we go. Alright, I'm going to set that as our fix, and then coming back to the legs page, Alana is our holding pattern. So if I go to the holding page, it is showing me that Alana, it is a quad radial and of S 171 degrees and max indicated airspeed that I'm supposed to fly at 265 knots, and then other information is leg time 1 minute and leg distance is 4.4 nautical miles away from my airport. Alright, so that's information regarding our holding chart. And coming on to the legs page, I'm just going to leave it here, and at this moment I probably am going to start my descent. So I'm going to select vertical speed, and we're going to descend to 10,000 feet. Alright, and I'm going to take 1,100 feet per minute descent. Then I'm going to change my speed reading from Mach to indicated airspeed. Coming onto the mode control panel, indicated airspeed must come down to about 300 knots. As we come below 15,000 feet, I'm going to go to 250 knots. Alright. Our current waypoint is on a heading of 282 degrees, which is Kiola. So I'm going to select 262 degrees on my heading. It's always good to make, just in case the autopilot disconnects itself, we need to maintain heading to our waypoint. It's 282 degrees. Alright, with that selected, that should be fine. Coming on to my primary flight instrument, we have MCP speed selected at 300 knots. We're coming down to that, and then I have LNAV and vertical speed. So I'm starting to descend towards my destination airport. So currently I believe we're flying over the Pacific Ocean, but the thing is you won't be able to see much because we have a cloud cover stretching from 1,000 feet all the way to just 100 feet above ground. And in that region we are going to do the auto landing as I have mentioned. But in the meantime, we have a very good visual range of more than 15 square miles, as you can see. We're flying at dusk, so you can actually see the sun that is almost setting in a distance ahead of us. One thing I just need to do is, I can see that now we're facing the sun, so we have a bit of a shadow inside the cockpit. So I'm just going to increase a bit of brightness inside the cockpit for us to see well. Alright, that should be fine. We have a good instrument brightness. And I'll probably do the same for the overhead panel as well. Alright, so with that being said, we'll continue our descent. And as we're coming on to 18,000 feet, I need to reset my barometer, and then I'll also set our radio altimeter. So at 18,000 feet I need to change my barometer from standard air pressure to the QNH reading for the local airport. Now QNH stands for Curie nautical height, which is basically a reading for the barometer that you need to set for your pressure. Alright, so I'm going to back to our normal QNH reading. Alright, so if you look at the bottom of my altitude tape, is showing 2992 inches, which is the barometer reference in terms of mercury inches, but I want to select it in terms of hectopascals. So I just come onto the mode control panel here and zoom in a bit, and then I have selected it to hectopascals, which is equivalent to 1013 hectopascals, which happens to be my QNH reading at the airport elevation of 13 feet at 15 degrees Celsius. Speaking of temperature, our outside air temperature is actually minus 19 degrees Celsius. So I should have turned on the anti-ice system in order to keep the pitot tubes from freezing. Alright, with that selected, we are now descending to 17,000 feet. Actually, I'm going to set my initial descent altitude to probably 15,000 feet, but I'm going to hold constant at 300 knots until I'm much closer to the airport. As I can see, I'm 48.3 nautical miles with the estimated time en route of 7.6 minutes. With that being said, you can actually see the ground speed and true airspeed are matched in terms of knots. So 381 knots for ground speed, 380 knots for true airspeed, and 300 knots for indicated airspeed. Our true airspeed is now Mach 0.609, and we're passing through 16,000 feet, which is equivalent to 5,000 meters above ground. Alright, one thing I need to do, we need to match our heading again with our tracking at 312 degrees. Alright, there we go. There's a chime inside the cockpit which is actually telling me that I have reached my initial descent altitude of I'm reaching my initial descent altitude of 15,020 feet. Now if you look at the bottom of my artificial horizon indicator, you can see a purple diamond. Now the purple diamond there actually a localizer for a certain runway below in a certain distance away from us. Now the localizer is basically going to give us lateral guidance into the airport. And as we approach into the airport, when I am the second autopilot, you're actually not going to notice that we will have a second diamond on a vertical path, and that will represent our glide slope. So basically, in an ILS or instrument landing system, you have a localizer which gives you lateral guidance, and then you have for vertical guidance a glide slope. ILS systems are part of what you call precision approach, because you have both vertical and lateral guidance. Another type of precision approach that is now available, which is very recent, is LPV, which stands for localizer performance with vertical guidance. It's basically a GPS form of navigation where you have a localizer, but for vertical guidance you have a ground augmentation system that is based on a GPS. And so this system is useful in certain parts of the world, but basically not everywhere. Alright, I think at this moment I'm going to continue my descent. So I'm going to 10,000 feet. Entering figures here requires patience. And then I'm going to select about 900 feet per minute. Actually, I'm going to take 1000 feet per minute, and I'm going to slow the aircraft down to 250 knots. So the nice thing is, in the Boeing 737-800 you have an auto throttle system that automatically regulates your speed. I believe this is a standard feature in most commercial aircraft. But now, because we're descending, it means that my speed will not drop as fast as I want it to. So I'm going to get some assistance from the speed brake, which is down here. If I just pull it up, we'll notice a gentle increase in the rate at which the speed is dropping. So we're coming down to 280 knots, and you can actually see a green marker pointing down that we are currently having a speed decrease. So once again, at 10,000 feet I'll be required to do some certain things to the cockpit. So I'm just going to go through the checklist and see what we need to do. After takeoff descent, we have already passed that. At descent, anti-ice must be sorted if it's required, and then landing altitude must be checked. Our landing altitude is 13 feet, and it gives us a QNH of 1013 hectopascals. And then radio altimeter and radio barometer must be set. Our radio barometer is not set, but I'm going to set minimums at 50 feet. Alright, so our radio altimeter is set for minimums at 50 feet, and our barometer is set for 1013 hectopascals. Auto brake must be set, so auto brake is located here. I'm going to set it to 3, and then passing through transition altitude, set altimeter to local, baro reference. I've already done that, and below 10,000 feet our speed must be 250 knots indicated airspeed. Alright, we are coming down to that, and I believe we are at 250 knots, so I'm going to bring down the speed brake. I don't need it anymore. And the auto throttle system is simply going to adjust the engine it's supposed to be. Alright, with that being said, blending lights must be on and passenger signs must be on as we pass through 10,000 feet. Alright, probably I just need a little more descent speed. I'm going to minus 1,300 feet per minute. So everything is set. And another interesting thing is that I actually have a COM radio here, which has dials and switches at work, but we don't have ATC, so it's pretty useless. I won't be able to set up COM frequencies, and my transponder is set to ATC. Alright, pretty much everything is well in this cockpit. So coming down to our legs page, we're going towards Kiola, which is 22 nautical miles away, and it's 4.3 minutes away. I think because we are much closer to that waypoint, I can increase my rate of descent to 1,500 feet per minute, 1,600 feet per minute. Alright, there's pretty much nothing to see at this altitude because all we have around us is cloud cover and a beautiful sun in the distance. So even though we have visual range that allows for visual flight rules, but we don't have much of visibility at lower altitude, so at some moment you're going to have to transition to instrument flight rules. I can see some high mountains in the distance there, as you can see, and we can't see the base of the mountains. Why? Because there's cloud cover everywhere. But interesting enough, we're in Hawaii, so there are certain mountains that are as high as 4,000 feet, and I believe that's one of them. The airport that we're actually landing at, Papa Hotel November Lima, actually sits within a range of mountains. Alright, there's a chime in the cockpit telling us that we've reached 10,000 feet. So at this moment, landing lights can come on, and passenger fasten seatbelt signs can come on. Engine ignition must go to continuous ignition. Alright, that is set, and that's it for below 10,000 feet. Before landing checklist for below 10,000 feet. Then the next thing is the approach checklist. We must check that our altimeter is set. Yes, it is. Localizer frequency set. It's 111.70 for us. And then localizer course is set. It's 92 degrees. And then flaps must be 15 and speed brake is armed. Speed brake is already armed, but we'll set flaps 15 degrees soon. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is descend to our initial descent altitude, which is 5,000 feet. And I'm going to take a vertical speed and we're going to start descending. And then the next thing I'm going to do at this moment is check our distance from that waypoint, which is 12.8 nautical miles. So I'm just going to continue it, and at this moment I'm going to take 220 knots. And as I pass through 200 knots, I'm going to take 15 degrees flaps for approach. Alright, so we continue our descent. Our speed brake is armed. Our second autopilot must be armed when we are within range of our ILS, and engine ignition switches are gone to continuous ignition, and landing flaps must be set afterwards. Alright, so at this moment I'm just going to monitor my altitude and my speed in order to make sure that the aircraft is doing the correct thing as we approach into this beautiful island of Oahu, which is the biggest island and the busiest island in Hawaii. Alright, so I'm 9 nautical miles away from Keola, and after that I'm going to Selek, which is 16 nautical miles. I'm currently at 8,000 feet and I'm descending at 1,400 feet, which is my sink rate. Now speed is not dropping again. Why? Because we are at we are angled down, so I'm going to assist that with the speed brake, bringing it up, and our speed should start to drop right away. In fact, at this time I would like to take 200 knots. So MCP speed is set to 200 knots, and I'm going to take approach flaps, which is 15 degrees. Having armed our approach flaps, you can start to see that the speed is higher rate of decrease. Why? Because we have a lot of drag on the aircraft due to the flaps and due to the speed brake, so the aircraft will start to drop speed much faster. Alright, we come to 7,000 feet, 7,600 feet, and I'm now 5 nautical miles from Keola, and I've estimated time en route of 1.2 minutes. Somehow I'm centered with the localizer, but I'm not sure for which runway. But anyway, as I am the second autopilot, you're going to notice that we'll have both the localizer and glide slope indicated. Alright, so now I believe we're at 200 knots. I'm going to put the speed brake down. And you can see the auto throttle system is regulating the thrust levers in order to maintain the required speed of 200 knots. There isn't really much to see in the distance, but I like the view of the sunset. You can see the dark red over the sky, over the cloud cover. Alright, there we are banking towards our next waypoint, which is Selek. Alright, so the aircraft is in a gentle turn, and you can see some magnificent reflections throughout the cockpit. Beautiful, isn't it? There we are. We're at 5,000. And then the next waypoint requires us to be at 2,700. So at this moment, I am going to continue descending to 2,700 feet, but only that I am not going to take the same rate of descent. Alright, so I'm going to reduce my rate of descent to just about 1,000 feet per minute. Alright, so this is where we need to monitor, because you're under instrument flight rules. We're going to Selig, then from Selig we're going to Rodau, which is 5 nautical miles, then from Rodau we're going to Fitchtree, then runway 8 left. So as soon as we line up with Rodau, which is my initial approach fix, as I said in my FMS, it's actually Selig is my initial approach fix. I'm going to try and arm the second autopilot and see if we can get the ILS runway frequency. The ILS signal for both the localizer and the glide slope. So I just wait for the aircraft to finish its turn as we line up with our runway. You can see in the distance there's some tall mountains there. This is quite a beautiful approach. Alright, so at this moment what I'm going to do is look at the aircraft as it intercepts Selig, which is now 12.7 nautical miles away with estimated time en route of 3.5 minutes. As soon as we get onto Selig, I'm going to arm the approach mode, and then I am going to select the second autopilot, and so we should be fine with that. So everything is set. We have auto brake set to 3, and our speed is at 200 knots. But for now, I'll leave it there. I'm not going to reduce speed for whatever reason whatsoever in the meantime. So we're tracking 105 degrees. There we go. Alright, 105 degrees is set in my heading to match with the little purple marker at the top. Alright, so there we go. We are now at 2,700 feet coming through. Now, speaking of auto landing is only required when we're doing our CAT III ILS approach, as I mentioned. But for the real aircraft, a pilot who has to perform an auto landing has to be very qualified in order to do an approach like that. Why? Because the aircraft has to descend completely on its own, and the pilot will not have much visibility outside. And less than 1% of all landings done CAT III approaches with auto landing system. Alright, I believe that's part of the mountains in the region where we are landing, and some of them, as I mentioned earlier, they're at 4,000 feet. The airport that we're landing is just somewhere, but we won't be able to see it from this distance, or from this altitude anyway, because it's below the cloud cover. But I must say, this is one beautiful feature of Hawaii. So we're now 8 nautical miles with estimated time en route of 2.2 minutes from Selig. And the aircraft is continuing to descend. We're now 2,700 feet, and I believe we're going to hold at this speed, at this altitude. We're holding at an indicated airspeed of 200 knots and at an altitude of 2,700 feet. Outside air temperature is now 10 degrees Celsius, so I believe I don't need anti-ice system. Having said that, The next checklist would require me to select my go around altitude, which in this instance would be 5,000 feet. Alright, so with that being said, at 2,700 feet, I am going to set my go around altitude. Alright, in that we have a missed approach altitude. In the case that we have a missed approach, we are going to climb runway heading to an altitude of 5,000 feet, and we are going to go to our holding waypoint and fly a holding pattern. Alright, so missed approach altitude is set to 5,000. Engine switches are at continuous ignition, and landing flaps will be set. Alright, we're going to set landing flaps when you got onto final VREF. Final VREF for today is 165 knots, and our landing flaps will be 25 degrees. So at this moment, I'm just going to try and stay under instrument flight rules. But because we're getting closer to the mountains and I can see them, I'd like to give another look at them before we eventually pop below the cloud cover, which is sitting at 1,000 feet above us. Now this is definitely what defines Hawaii. But anyway, our waypoint is now 2.9 nautical miles, and from there we are going to Rodau. Then from Rodau we are going to Fitchtree. Alright. So we're just gently cruising along at this altitude. Now this is one thing I like about the Boeing 737 is that it is a very good visibility out of the cockpit. And I'm sure real life pilots must really enjoy that as well. Alright, you can see all the magnificent reflections of the sun inside the cockpit. So I can just set my lighting brightness. I probably don't need it as much. Alright, there we are. We have passed our initial approach fix. And at this moment, once the aircraft has selected its heading, I am just going to arm the approach mode. The approach mode must be selected. We have runway radio frequency of 111.7. Second autopilot in command. Alright. Now if you look at our primary flight instrument, you can now see that we have two diamonds. The diamond at the bottom is representing our localizer, and it's actually showing us that the aircraft is centered with the localizer. Right is at the top. It's showing our glide slope. But in order for us to line up with our glide slope, it must be at the center, which means that we are below our glide slope. So we need to maintain this altitude, a leveled altitude of 2,720, until we get below the glide slope and the aircraft will start descending on its final approach. Alright. Having said that, I'm going to change my display here to approach display. And you can see a rose compass with a course deviation indicator, and to our right you can also see the glide slope is represented with the diamond. And as I mentioned, in order for us to be on our glide slope, the purple diamond must be centered with the white line in the center there, in between the four circles. And the standby instrument indicator, it's showing us the localizer and the glide slope. Alright, having said that, I'm going to press in the center of this instrument for adjusting our map mode, which says CTR. And if you look at it, our rose compass is shrinked into a conventional compass, showing us our course deviation indicator, which shows us the localizer. The purple bar in the center, or the purple needle as you may call it, is showing our current location, our current path, and the white broken line on the outer edges shows the flight path that we need to be. Now, because our course deviation needle is centered with the course that we need to be on, it means that we're on the correct localizer. Have a look, we're now intercepting the glide slope and the aircraft is starting to descend. Now at this moment I'm going to descend to our final VREF of 161 knots. $165 knots, I'm sorry. Alright, 165 knots is set, and you'll notice that the speed will start to increase gradually. So once the speed reaches 180 knots, I'm going to 20 degrees flaps, and there we're starting to descend. So at this moment we're simply required to stay under instrument flight rules, and you can see up ahead of us is just a thick cloud cover. As I mentioned, we won't be able to see our runway as we approach into the airport until we're very close to the airport actually. So the aircraft is just adjusting itself onto the course, and I can hear a tone inside the cockpit showing me that I'm passing above an NDB station. But anyway, I didn't tune my radio for NDBs. I do have a radio that shows me a non-directional beacon, but currently I'm using Nav1 radio for localizer and glide slope for my ILS. Alright, now we are on the correct glide slope, and we are centered with the localizer, which is being transmitted from the end of runway 8 left. I'm just waiting for the speed to drop even more, and at this moment I'm going to take flaps to 20 degrees. Coming through 165 knots, we're going to landing flaps, which is 25 degrees flaps. Our speed brake is down, and I'll just make sure that our auto brake is set, and come onto the overhead panel. Landing lights are on, runway 10 off lights must be on, engine ignition switches are continuous ignition, and fasten seatbelt signs are on, anti-ice is not required, window heat is on, and pretty much everything is set up on our overhead panel. So there we are, passing through the cloud cover. 1000 feet annunciated by the radio altimeter. Landing gear can come down. So I'll wait for 3 green to be indicated. But now everything is gone dark because we are now flying inside the flying under instrument flight rules, as I mentioned. Alright, I have 3 green on the landing gear, and I'll continue descending. I am not going to disengage the autopilot. The autopilot is actually going to land us. That's the requirement for category 3 instrument landing approach. We have 500 feet annunciated there by the radio altimeter. $400 feet. Minimums are set to 50 feet. So the aircraft will actually land itself, and afterwards I will then disengage the autopilot and take manual control. 200 feet annunciated. We are landing. 100 feet, and there is runway ahead of us. Minimums annunciated. We are landing. Alright, touchdown. and thrust reverse. We're going to thrust reverse to 60 knots. Oops, the aircraft is having problems maintaining lateral control. That is not supposed to happen. But anyway, thrust reversers can be cut out and brakes cut out. And we can start our taxi. Alright, it seems like the autopilot was not lined up with the runway heading. But anyway, what we just demonstrated today is the ability of the auto landing system in the Boeing 737-800. Alright, there we are coming onto the taxiway. We're required to maintain a taxi speed of 60 knots, of 20 knots. Alright, I'm just going to hold short here. And then landing lights can come off. Runway turn off lights can come off. Engine ignition switches can go to the off position. And flaps can be retracted. Speed brake can come down. And auto brake can go to the off position. Alright, whilst flaps are in transition, we'll continue with our taxi. Alright, so the terminal that is ahead of us is where we're going to park the aircraft. We are now at Papa Hotel November Lima, which is Daniel K International Airport. Alright, after landing checklist, transponder should go to the off, flaps are retracted, speed brake is down, landing lights must come off, they are off, and I need to turn on the taxi light. Taxi light can come on. And then strobe can come off. Alright, it's pretty difficult to get hold of. Alright, strobe light is off. And then taxi lights are on, cabin lights is required. Anti-ice is required to stand off. We don't need the anti-ice system. And then APU start and check if it's running. So we're going to start the auxiliary power unit at the moment. Alright, the APU is starting. I just sweep the aircraft in order to line up with this taxiway. Alright, okay. APU is running and probe heat off and engine ignition switch is off, auto brake is off, and we'll continue taxiing. You can see some facilities at this airport, hangars and other buildings in a distance there. Alright, at this moment, I think I'm going to park the aircraft now. So I'm just going to start making a gentle swing to the right, to the left I mean. Alright, so there we are lining up with a gate where we're going to park the aircraft. I'm sure you can see the main airport tower in the inner distance there. Alright, there we go, 737-800 lining up with a gated Papa Hotel November Lima. Alright, there comes this gate and I'm going to set my parking brake. Alright, there we go. Now the aircraft is parked. Alright, the next thing I'm just going to do is turn off the taxi light, and then we're going to continue with our checklist. What does it say afterwards? It says taxi lights must be off, parking brake must be set, parking brake is set, and I'm going to get rid of display modes. Okay, so all the radar systems can go off, waypoints, standard terminal arrival, weather radar, airport data, position and terrain, and traffic radar. They must all go to the off, which they are. And then, having done that, I'm going to switch off auto throttle, flight directors, and then we are going to make sure that we have ground contact. Engine fuel cutoff levers can go to the off position. Engine cutoff switches can come off. And then the next thing is, we don't need engine generators, so I'm just going to turn them off. And then I'm going to turn off fuel pumps. All the fuel pumps can come off. That passenger signs can come off, bleed air system from the APU can come on. So we have APU bleed, engine bleeds can go off, passenger signs can come off, and then fuel pumps are off, electro-hydraulic systems can go off, all the hydraulic equipment can go off, and then isolation valve must be open, flight directors must be off, electrical power is established, and doors are open. IRS mode selectors can go off, we don't have them. And at this moment, with everything done, I'm just going to switch off the APU generators, APU bleed switch, and finally the APU itself. And bus transfer switch can go to, and the battery master switch can come off. And there you have it, 737 back into a cold and dark state. Everything, all the electrical systems and everything has been turned off, and we're nicely parked at this gate in Papa Hotel November Lima. Alright, thank you guys for watching. Join me as I do another video in Explain Mobile. Goodbye.